Okay, hi everybody. Happy Thursday evening torch tutorial stream. How's everybody doing wherever you are? Okay, so it really is this camera that is the bitch. This is the camera that is making the stream skip. Because when I unplugged that camera last night, everything was hunky-dory. So I really need to... Okay. Well, you know, process of elimination, it's always good to know what the problem is, even if you don't know how to fix it immediately. So sorry we're back to Skippy stream, but so I unplugged the Heather cam to see if that would help, but that did not help. So, haha, I think you mean glitter friend, Corvus. I am your friend in glitter. That's what I am. Okay. Is it better without the Heather cam? But once again, at least now that I know what the problem is, I can make with the Googling, try and figure out how to fix it. But anyway, so, oh my gosh, okay. See, I got so spoiled last night when the stream stopped doing that. And of course I have this like rat's nest of cords and cables. Okay, I was right. That is the Heather cam. Okay, we'll see if that makes any difference at all. But I know, I love the video of your floor, Corvus. That was amazing. Okay, so now once again, now that I figured out why the stream is skipping, I'm gonna try and figure out how to fix it. There's nothing I can do right now, so we're just gonna have to go with it. So welcome to Torch Thursday. Our project for today is this, which I call the Toggle Charm Necklace. So the necklace in the photo I actually made and gave to my mother for her birthday on, why is my bird inside out? I made and gave to my mother for her birthday on Sunday. Oh, I guess it's not. So I don't have a sample for you because I bought a bunch of lovely components to make my mother a bracelet for her birthday, and then I misplaced all of them, and so I had to make a last-minute birthday present, and I also had to make a torch class sample, so ta-da, I combined them into one. The reason I call it the Toggle Charm Necklace is because my mother is obsessed with the David Yurman toggle necklace, which retails for, you know, the bargain price of, you know, starting at $1,800 and going up from there. So obviously that wasn't going to be her birthday present, but I tried to do something that was kind of inspired by that. And I think for an on-the-fly, last-minute, strictly working with what I had on hand, I was pretty happy with that. And so if you look at the actual photo, this necklace is actually 3 separate parts connected by a clip ring. So that means that the 2 parts that hang down are actually completely separate from each other and completely separate from the necklace. So that means a couple of things. That means that you actually can, you know, you can just make these 2 charms, put them on a chain that you use a clip ring on, or you can also make more charms, more different styles of things, kind of like we did last night, and mix and match them. So let's talk supplies for this evening's tutorial. There's a lot of them. I was running around before stream trying to gather all of the supplies that I needed, and I was like, oh my god, there's so many supplies. Why are there so many supplies? Why do I do this to myself repeatedly? Okay, so you are going to need some sterling silver sheet metal. Yes, I'm using this tiny little bitty scrap. With the price of sterling these days, most of us are using every single little bit that we possibly can. I'm going to need some bezel strip. I prefer the fine silver bezel strip, and this is 1/8 inch tall. The height that you need for your bezel strip is 100% determined by the height of your stone. So for my stone, I have this just pretty basic little black star Insta-Tight cabochon. So it's not particularly tall, so it should be, and I just threw my solder on the floor, it should be perfectly fine with that height of bezel strip. I'm going to grab that off the floor before I forget. I'm going to need that. Okay, solder retrieved. You're going to need all 3 densities of solder: easy, medium easy, and extra easy. You're going to need some sterling silver chain. I'm using a slightly less chunky one than I did in my sample, and I'm using a smaller stone as well. And then I am going to use the same size of tubing to make my toggle, because that's what I pulled the stones for. It might look a little chunky, but I think maybe if I make it a little bit shorter, it'll work. So the last real supply that you're going to need is some heavy wall sterling tubing. So the heavy wall tubing is thicker than your typical tubing, and this is what you use to make tube settings. And then I do need 2 stones that fit into my heavy wall tubing. And so the way it should look if you're going to use heavy wall tubing to make a setting, or how do I show this? You get to see some of my mess, but okay, it should look like that. Okay, so your stone should set in that tubing. There we go. Sort of. Your stone should set in that tubing, and you should have a thin rim of silver visible on all sides. So this is heavy wall tubing that will fit a 5mm stone, and that's what I have. I've got 2 5mm lab created rubies that I'm going to be using. If you buy your tubing from Rio Grande, there are pluses and minuses to that. The plus is that in the description of the tubing, they actually include what size gemstone it fits. The downside is they only sell it in 12-inch lengths. I think I've had this length of tubing for about 7 years, and I've only used 2 inches of it, because every tube setting that you do, like if you're just doing them normally to solder onto things, takes like 1/8 of an inch. So you're investing a lot in product that's going to be, you know, sitting in your stock for a long time, unless you do a lot of tubing, tube setting. This project is nice because it uses up a little bit more of your tubing all at once, because the tubing is going to make that toggle, and then we're going to set the stones into the end of it. You're also going to need a little bit of 16 gauge half round wire, and that's going to be to make that kind of accent holder for the toggle, and just a little bit of 16 or 18 gauge regular round sterling silver wire. That's going to need to make the loop at the top of our bezel piece. So how you go about constructing this, it really doesn't matter which one you start with, the toggle one or the bezel one, since they're each constructed separately. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the bezel one, just because that's what I feel like tonight. Okay, so I'm going to start by taking my, okay, as far as tools go, you're going to need a lot of them. You're going to need all your soldering tools, plus hammers, and a bench block, plus pliers, plus a ring clamp, plus a prong pusher, plus a 5mm setting burr, and a tool that can use that setting burr, either Dremel or a flex shaft, and that's just for starters. You know, if you solder on the regular, you probably have a lot of these tools lying around your workbench already. The things that if you have a soldering bench already, the things that you need to think about if you're going to do this project is you need to make sure you've got tubing. You need to make sure you've got enough sheet to be the back for your bezel. You need to make sure you've got the right size setting burr for your stones. And then everything else you probably have lying around. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my rawhide mallet, and I'm going to flatten this scrap of sterling that I'm using. It is very important that it's flat, because if it's not flat, you're not going to get your bezel to zip onto it. It doesn't matter that it's dirty. I could pickle it if I wanted to, but since I'm going to be fluxing it, it should clean itself up rather nicely. Speaking of, I should grab my flux, move my camera while I'm at it. Also, it's really funny because when I was going to make this project for my mom, I was like, where's all my tubing? Why can't I find any tubing? It's all here in my streaming area instead of over there in my other work area. So, you know, live and learn. Okay, so I flattened that out. So it's nice and flat now. And I'm going to take my stone and I'm going to grab my bezel strip. And okay, it's more efficient to work off of the coil of bezel strip, but I really find that that is really extremely awkward. so I'm just going to cut myself about 1.25 inches of my bezel strip. Again, this is 1/8 inch. I prefer the fine silver bezel strip. There's nothing wrong with sterling silver bezel strip. Use whatever floats your boat. So I'm going to take my bezel strip and I'm going to roll it around my stone. And I actually, on one of my metalsmithing forums, there was a great tip about using double stick tape to stick your stone down to your work surface so it doesn't roll around, and I think that's absolutely brilliant. I just haven't gotten around to getting any yet. Okay, so I've got that molded around my stone, and so now I'm going to go ahead and cut right where they're overlapping, and I want to make sure when I make that mark that I'm holding that tightly around my stone. And this is where the fact that I'm not super ambidextrous is unfortunate, because I'm going to try to make that mark with my left hand whilst holding my stone with my right. Corvus, I clipped a bunch of stuff from last night and I'm not done yet. When it's all done, I will make you a highlights reel. Alright, so I'm going to take my bezel, and I'm at my mark. I'm just going to flush cut that. That means I want to make sure that the flat side of my cutters is facing my bezel, and I'm just going to snip that off. And then I am going to have to take a file and just flatten this out. I mean, relive the fun or relive the trauma? I mean, I kind of think it might be 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. All right, so I'm just going to take a file and I'm just going to smooth out the edges of this bezel so that I can get them to fit nicely together so I can solder. Well, Corvus wound up falling in love with her little dragon friend by the end of the stream. Okay, so now I'm going to tension fit it, so I'm just going to take my edges and I'm going to bend them past each other until they'll snap together and they'll stay together without me having to hold them. And at this point, if your bezel's not round anymore, that's okay. It's not the same shape. Even if it gets out of shape at this point, it's okay. It's all right. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and finish this tension fit, and sometimes when you're tension fitting you'll get this kind of weird peak that keeps your edges from going together. So the best way to fix that is just to take your chain nose and squash. And if you go into like traditional metalsmithing, they'll oftentimes tell you at this point that you need to make your piece look like the letter D. So you literally need to flatten that whole top side so your pieces are coming straight in together. I'm a little too lazy for that, so I usually just wind up flattening just that one section. Okay, so there we go. So now I've got my bezel tension fit. My edges are nice and cleanly together. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and solder this bezel. We're going to solder that with medium solder because it's the first joint on our piece, and so we don't want it to go unsoldered when we're doing the rest of our soldering. And finally put water at my work surface. It was an emotional roller coaster, it's true. Okay, so I've got my flux. And you might think you don't need to flux this because it's fine silver, but remember your solder's not fine silver, so you do need to flux it in order to get your solder to flow. So I'm just going to flux that joint. Set that back on my work surface. And I'm going to cut myself one. It was so much fun. It was so much fun making the box. It really was. Why do I keep dropping my solder? Though everything in my life is glitter too, Corvus. Like my house, my car, my store, my cat. Because I did some of it in my backyard. And then Elton decided to go and roll in it. So yeah, it's all glitter all the time here as well. That night that I glitter bombed myself, like it was in my hair, it was on my chest, it was on my arms, it was on my back, it was all over. I mean, that was like pre-glitter karma. That was glitter punishing me for like even the thought of the act. Okay, so I have one small piece of solder, and alright, I think I'm going to pick transfer that, which means I need to be able to see my joint. So can you still see? Yes, you can. Alright, so I'm going to drop that there. It's magical photo editing, or video editing. I like to think I'm getting better at that. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and solder this bezel shut. Alright, so I'm just going to heat the bezel. This is really thin wire, so you don't have to heat it very much. Just grab my solder, get up on my pick, and then just heat my joint and just drop it right there onto my joint. And it went in, just make sure it flows through, and there we go. So, super simple, just soldering my bezel, and then I need to set that aside to cool. Well, that's a matter of opinion, Corvus. I believe I would have to double check the video. I believe the color of glitter I ordered might have been magenta. Oh, and it didn't go. Okay, I'm going to need to redo that in a minute. Oh, you know, it's all about how you perceive reality. You can perceive reality however you want to, Corvus. Alright, so that did not actually solder together. Try this again. There's still plenty of solder on there. I think my contact is better this time. Alright, I'm going to get up close and personal with this. Tweezers. Tweezers are your friend when picking up hot objects. Okay, I think this time it actually soldered. Yay! Alright, so then once that cools, I wonder... too small. Okay, so then once this is cool enough to touch, which it currently is, I'm going to just form it around my stone to get my shape back. It should be pretty malleable at this point. I mean, it was pretty malleable before, but it should be extra malleable now that you've soldered it. You need to make sure your stone goes all the way down in it level. A tight fit is good. A tight fit is actually ideal, but you need to make sure that it does actually go down into the bezel. Alright, so that's my shape of my stone, and it's still flat, which is good. So now we're going to go ahead and zip this down onto our silver. So I'm going to take our piece of silver, and I'm going to flux that, and I'm going to go to easy solder. I'm going to drop this onto my silver, and I'm going to, once again, we're going to try and be as conservative with our metal as possible. So I'm going to butt that right up into this corner, so that actually leaves me like this whole piece here that I can do something else with. Now I'm going to go to easy solder. I'm going to cut 4 pieces, and I'm going to position each piece right at a compass point where my bezel is touching my back plate. I'm not super good at zipping bezels, so I usually cut 4 decently sized pieces of solder. Mine are about 1/8 of an inch. People who are really, really good at this can zip an entire bezel with like 1/8 inch piece of solder. I am not those people though. The one kind of thing to think about when you're using more solder than you really should is sometimes it'll flow, and it won't necessarily zip the bezel, but it'll take your joint, which should be like this, and it'll kind of curve that out, and sometimes that means your stone won't fit in there. So, you know, there's definitely something to be said for using only as much as you need and not more in this case, but like I said, I'm not very good at zipping bezels. I mean, I'm adequate, but I'm not brilliant, so I'm gonna go with my 4 pieces. So now I'm gonna light my torch, maybe. There we go. So I'm going to heat this whole piece of metal because this is all going to be acting as a heat sink. So I'm going to heat everything, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to concentrate my heat on the outside to try and pull that solder underneath, because otherwise what it's going to do is it's just going to flow straight up the bezel, because that's going to be the hottest part. And we don't want that. Sometimes sometimes they scooch when the flux boils, so you got to kind of scooch them back. So I just want to make sure that everything is good and hot before I even try to pull my solder under the bezel. Ugh, I'll be right there, Lori. Screw this tutorial nonsense. Alright, there we go. So you can kind of watch it, follow around. This is why it's called zipping, is because it kind of zips around your bezel. And you want to make sure you get all of your bezel, which I think I did. Alright, so that was successful zipping of my bezel. Put that over there to cure. Or not cure. I was just reading Lori's comment. To cool is what I meant. God, I miss having the time to do things like make pickles and can stuff and anyway, gonna stop being whiny now. Okay, so it's just gonna take that a minute to cool, so we're just gonna let that do its thing. I'm gonna have a sip of champagne, because why not? But I've been wanting to get a meat grinder attachment for my KitchenAid so that I can make my own ground beef. But then I keep saying to myself, when exactly do you think you're gonna have time to make your own ground beef? Like, just don't do it. Stupid voice of reason. Ugh, ow. Oh, is that his name? Purple? He's yours, Corvus. You can call him whatever he likes. Or whatever you like. Hopefully he likes it too. Hopefully he's not like, my name should be Mr. Pig, bitch. That was before 7:30. Sorry, kids. Sorry, there's just some solder board that's like super stuck on my piece. So sometimes you'll get, especially when your solder board is in kind of crappy condition like mine, you'll get solder board that sticks to the back of your piece, and the easiest way to get rid of it is actually to burn it off. You just want to make sure that you don't undo your soldering while you're doing that, but it'll kind of turn into this ooze, and then you can just kind of get it off with your solder pick. And then back to the bench block to cool. Is that the language, Corvus, or the color? Which is more offensive? Okay, so while I'm waiting for that to cool, I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of multitasking, and I'm going to start working on my other charm as well. So I'm going to take my tubing, and I'm going to mark where I'm going to cut it. So I think I want to make this one a little bit shorter and stubbier than my sample one. So I'm going to do about 3/4 of an inch. My sample one, I believe, was an inch. So I'm just going to mark it at 3/4 of an inch. So there we go. And then I'm going to cut it using my jeweler's saw and this crazy looking contraption. Okay, this is actually a tube holding jig, and I promise I will figure that skipping thing out. I swear. It's a tube holding jig. It's an expensive tool that only does one thing, but I promise if you cut a lot of tubing, it's totally worth it. Just gonna go ahead and load my blade in my saw. So the way that this works is you put your tubing into this little V slot. You're going to hold this in your non-dominant hand when you're sawing. So you're going to put your tubing in this little V slot, and I'm going to line up my mark with this skinnier channel here, and then this lever flips up and over the top, and you press down on that to hold your tubing in place. Now typically you would brace this against a bench pin, but since I don't have a bench pin right this moment, I'm just going to hold it. What was that?
Oh, don't worry about it.
Okay. Alright. And then I'm just going to sew. It gives me anxiety, Corvus, because we always seem to be behind on our repairs, so every phone ring could be a person who's mad that we haven't finished their stuff. Though I would really rather somebody call and be mad than the people who just walk in and are like, well, it's been here for so long, I just assumed it would be ready. It's like, just if you had called yesterday, it would have been ready today. Don't just walk in and freak people out. Sorry, let me, like, I've got my shoulders like all the way up around my ears. And of course fell on the floor. But so that's about how long it takes to cut a piece of tubing. You know, obviously the thinner the tubing is, the less time it takes you to cut. This little guy really, really is a lifesaver, I swear. Like I said, it's an expensive tool, but if you cut a decent amount of tubing, it's utterly and completely worth it. Okay, so now I have my cut piece of tubing, and I'm just going to take a file to the ends of that so that I can make sure that they are even and flat, because otherwise our stones are not going to set flat. So I'm just filing the edge. And okay, so you don't need to do a ton of filing, you just want it to be even and flat. So I'm going to set that aside because now I can come back to this, which is now cool enough to touch, and I'm going to make sure that it zipped all the way around. Oh, and it didn't. It's a lovely little void right there. Okay, so let's see. So right here, and it's pretty dang obvious there. See that big old void right there? Yeah, so that needs to be fixed. So back to the torch for that one. And I think I have plenty of solder. I just need to kind of pull it into that gap. So we're going to see how this goes. That's hot. Just thinking that maybe I need to bend that back plate up a little bit to get better contact. Let's see if that helps the situation any. Alright, so we're trying to zip our solder to fill this void right here. Okay, we got it. So what I did there is I used my solder pick to kind of trace a line for my solder to follow and just kind of pull it over into that area where I needed it to be. That doesn't always work. And once again, if you're a real rock star with your torch, you can pull it with nothing but the heat. But since I am only a mid-level rock star, not like a stadium rock star, oftentimes I find it is easier to like use my solder pick to just kind of draw that solder over a bit and then let the heat do the rest. Okay, so while that's cooling again, I'm going to go ahead and make my little attachment detail for my toggle. So I'm going to take my half round wire, this is some 16 gauge half round, and I'm just going to bend it around my tubing, and I want to go ahead and bend it all the way around so that it crosses. You know, I've gotten myself enough wire. I guess we'll see in a minute. Alright, so I've got it all the way bent around so that it crosses, and I want it to fit snug. So as you see, this really isn't fitting as snugly as I might like. So I'm just going to take the two ends. Ow, how did I just manage to do that? Ouch. I'm just going to gently pull on them to make my circle get a little bit smaller. I have no idea how to put this on camera, so I'm just going to do it. Just a gentle pull, okay? You don't want to make it too small or it's not going to fit on there. So you just want a nice snug fit. Okay, I think that'll probably work well. Alright, so then I'm going to take my pliers and I'm going to bend these two wires, these two kind of bunny ear crossings, and I'm going to bend them back. Like so. And then bring them back together because I want to solder these together. So I'm going to bring them, I'm going to bring that point where they are, that point where they're bent back right here, that corner, I'm going to bring that together. And just like I did on my bezel, I'm going to do a tension fit on that. So I'm actually going to squeeze them past each other and let them fall into line. I want to make sure I'm gonna have to re-round this after I solder it, and hopefully it'll still fit. So I'm gonna grab my soldering board and we're back to medium solder because this is our first joint on this particular piece of the project. So just one piece of medium solder flux. I'm gonna drop it right there in the center to solder, sorry about that, to solder those two bits together. So we're just gonna heat it, grab our solder, and then just touch our solder to that joint, and there we go. Now that's soldered together. And it goes over to the bench block to cool down. That's not going to take very long because it's not a very big piece of metal. While I'm waiting for that to cool, I'm going to go back to my bezel and I'm going to cut around the edge of my bezel so that I've got a flush edge. A lot of jewelers will do this with a saw, but you can also do it, really, you can also do it with the metal shears. Focus, maybe focus, maybe no focus. Well, anyway, focus or no focus, I have cut it out. There we go. And then I'm going to go ahead and clean up these edges with my file because I want them to be flush with my bezel. You can also do this with a sanding disc. It goes a little bit faster than doing it with a file. But it's not going to take too long with the file either. So your goal is to just get everything on this edge flush and flat. So if you've got a nice sharp file, like I said, this shouldn't take very long, but if you're the impatient type, you can absolutely do this on your flex shaft or your Dremel with a sanding disc. And obviously the better you are at your cutting, the less time you have to spend filing. I didn't do a super great job of cutting this, and so now I'm having to file it a little bit longer than I would have had I done a better job. Interesting, I never thought of filing as ASMR, Corvus. That's interesting. Okay, so that is what I would call sufficiently clean and flush bezel. Now we're going to go ahead and solder the loop onto that, and we are going to also solder it onto our piece of chain. So I don't want it to be too long and dangling, so I'm going to make this piece of chain about 3/4 of an inch, which for this chain is about 5 links. Good to know. Alright, so I've got 5 links of chain, and I've got my 16 gauge wire that I grabbed, and I'm just going to make a loop with my round nose pliers out of my 16 gauge wire. I'm just going to bend that around to make a circle, essentially making a jump ring, and I'm going to cut that. So, cut and cut, like so, and then we're going to open up this jump ring. We're going to drop our chain onto the jump ring. We're going to close that jump ring up, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to solder it onto the back of my bezel. So I'm going to have to do a little bit of tweezer work to do that, so I'm going to go ahead and flux my bezel. I want to make sure I flux my ring as well. And I'm going to grab some easy solder. No, we're at extra easy solder now. Extra easy solder. And I'm going to put a small piece of that onto my bezel, and then the back of my bezel, and then I'm going to sweat it on there. So I'm going to place that piece there. And I'm just going to heat it until it flattens out. Really, hairs? There we go. Okay, so that's sweating my solder. I'm going to grab my tweezers. I'm going to turn my torch back on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my ring, and I want to try and solder my ring to my bezel without soldering it to my chain as well. So I'm just going to touch that to where my solder is and heat. Ooh, just melted my chain. So this just got even shorter. Alright, but I did actually manage to solder it to my bezel. But since this chain is so thin, yeah, I totally melted the closest link to my bezel, which is annoying in a number of ways. So now this just got a lot shorter. See? So I melted one link, so that came off. So now we just have this, but at this point we are just going to go with it. I'm going to put it over here. I'm going to put that over there. Maybe I'll use that for my toggle. And now we're back to, so that's got to cool, and then we can go ahead and set our stone in that. Okay, back to our bezel, not our bezel, our toggle. And I'm going to grab my mandrel, and I'm going to round this out. So just push it down. Well, hi Shaquille, how are you? Welcome in. How's everything going? Alright, and I have a tendency, to shrink a bit. So I'm just going to planish it out on my mandrel a little. So I've got it on my mandrel, and I'm going to grab my chasing hammer, which is underneath everything, of course. There we go. Alright, and I'm just going to pound this a bit and make it a little bit bigger. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tap all around this with my chasing hammer. And then push it down. And tap it a little bit more. Because of the little feeties it's easier if you put it on the edge of your table. Any more bats in your house, Shaquille? I finally heard that story last night for the first time. There's my piece of tubing. I don't know, apparently you were on stream at one point and then there was a bat in your house.
It's true.
Heather corroborates. Alright, I'm very close. I need to make it a little bit bigger because what I'm going to do next is I'm going to sweat some solder onto the... Hi, Sharon! Welcome! Okay, I'm going to need to sweat some solder onto the inside of this, and so it needs to be just a skosh bigger than my actual tubing. So I'm just going to keep planishing this out until it gets to be the right size. Well, we're glad that you survived the bat incident and lived to comment another day. Alright, so yeah, okay. So that's good. That's the fit we want. So it's snug, but I don't have to force it on there. Now I am going to go ahead and straighten out these wires that I've gotten completely cattywampus. Okay, so now I'm going to solder this onto the tube, and then I'm going to use these to make these two little bunny ears here to make a loop that's going to get soldered around my chain. Okay, that was from all the filing. Okay, so I'm going to go to Easy Solder, and I'm going to try and sweat some solder onto the inside of my loop. So once again, I need to flux that. And I need to grab some Easy Solder. Okay, so I'm gonna pick transfer this. Let's see what's gonna be the best angle for you guys to see this from. That'll probably be better. All right. My phone keeps buzzing. Okay, so torch, solder pick. Hey, Charles! So, did Heather tell you about my unscheduled dumpster diving expedition?
No.
So, there's going to be some Tetris involved. Because, hold please, stream. You can hear about my dumpster diving expedition as well. So, I was walking in from the church, and the house on the corner, the one with the beautiful garden, their trash bins were overflowing with all of these beautiful picture frames and light fixtures, and there was a beautiful curtain rod.
Gotta get 'em.
So yeah, so my car is fuller than I would have liked it to be. So fit in what you can. It's unlocked.
Okay.
Anything that doesn't fit, it's okay. I will figure it out tomorrow.
And just this corner here.
That corner, yes. This is your bag. These are your displays.
Oh, awesome.
And this bag does not go.
Okay.
So yeah, everything else in this corner.
Okay.
So feel free to use the front seat, the back seat, any space you can
Except
find.
for the driver's seat.
Yeah, I would prefer not.
Okay, sounds good. I'll get that done.
Thank you. Okay. Corvus, it was literally in the trash can. Like, so here in Dallas we have like those big rolling trash bins. It was literally in the trash bin. So therefore I was not stealing, I was dumpster diving. So anyway, back to exactly. I'm giving them a new life. I'm sorry, I can't, like, I really don't need any more things in my, I was asking to be stolen. I really don't need any more things in my house, but I just can't let pretty things go to the trash. Like, it just seems wrong. So I will take them, I will sort through them, I will give some of them away, I will keep some of them, move them on to new homes. But yes, I definitely, Charles graciously agreed to come and load stuff into the car because we're trying to get ready for filming on Saturday, and that's involving a lot of get stuff out of the store for, 3 days. So my car is going to be a rolling storage unit for that amount of time. But I was expecting it to be empty, and now it is not empty. It is definitely half full of other stuff. Okay, so back to soldering. Alright, so I'm going to heat this. Figure out where did I drop my, there's my solder. Alright, so I'm going to pick up my solder on my pick. Okay, and so where I want to get it is I want to get it on the inside here. So I'm just going to touch it to the inside, and there we go. So now I've got solder sweat onto the inside of that. See? Thank you, Corvus. It's true. Like, literally in the trash. Like, would be put into the trash truck and, like, smashed to death. Can't do it. Just cannot do it. Okay, so, alright, so this one's ready for us to set our stone. This one, I just need it to, alright, I'm going to use this poor sad piece of chain that I burned off because the rest of it is still good. Oh, that's only 3 links. I think I want more than that. I think I want 5 links. Alrighty. So now that this is cool, it's just gonna go, it's gonna slide onto my tube. And this is why I needed it to be not completely snug, because that solder actually takes up space. So it's gonna be, you're gonna have to force it on there because of the space that solder takes up on the inside. I might need to plenish that even a little bit bigger. Oh yes, hammer, hammer. Just a little bit more. And the planishing doesn't affect the solder that's on the inside. Like, it's still solder even if it's flattened, so it'll still work. Dropping it doesn't help. Okay, this is obviously going to take a minute. So let's see. So tomorrow is Freeform Friday. So I don't quite know what I'm going to do. I might be knotting because I have several knotted necklaces that I want to make for Saturday. Or I might be doing doll jewelry because that's another pressing matter here at the Beading Dreams. So we'll see what I'm doing tomorrow. Whatever it is, I guarantee it'll be interesting on one level or another. Okay, so I finally got this on here. So now, since I already have solder on there, what I want to do is I do want to scooch this just a little bit and apply some flux under there. And then scooch it back. And we want to make sure it's in the middle. And then we're just going to heat that till that solder reflows. I said doll jewelry, Corvus, like for fashion dolls. I could also do dog jewelry though. So we're just going to heat this until that solder reflows, and there we go. So you can, okay, so did you see it kind of snap into place there? So that's how you know that it actually worked. Got to decide to cool. So at this point, I am going to say that what I would typically do with these right now, before I set the stones, is I would put them in the tumbler and I would let them polish up. I did pick stones that I know can go in the tumbler, so I'm going to go ahead and set the stones for you on stream, and then I will tumble them. And oh, and that pendant from from last week, it's still tumbling because I had it. There was an incident with the tumbler. When the tumbler gets dirty and I'm too lazy to clean it, eventually it takes all of that free copper that is pulled off of all the pieces and it just starts plating it onto everything that's in there. So everything in the tumbler turned copper. So I had to strip the copper off and retumble it. So I haven't forgotten that I promised to post that piece in Discord when it was finished. I just literally haven't finished it yet. Still too hot to touch. Also, there's a gnat. Not a good place for a gnat, Mr. Gnat. You're gonna get your ass torched. Okay, so now we're gonna make the loop, which is pretty simple. Just gonna take my round nose and bend. And this is actually a pretty small chain, so I think I can go ahead and trim this one down to about a 1/16 of an inch, and then bend this loop around. Hi, Keiko! Keiko on the light side! What's up with that? As a light side Keiko. What? I know, weird. Okay, so I just bent that around to meet to make that loop, and I'm going to just open it up a scotch, put my chain on, close it, well, hi Keiko. I'm running overtime, not surprisingly. This is a pretty complicated project like last week. I think next week I need to do a simple soldering project. Like VV simple, like I don't even know what. Soldering circles together. Okay, so I've got my chain and I'm going to tuck that underneath because I really don't want to melt it. I'm just going to try and drop a tiny bit of solder right there to join those together. And at this point we are at extra easy solder, which is good because that makes it less likely that I'm going to melt my chain like I did on my last one. So a little bit of flux. Again, get that chain as far out of the way as possible. And here goes nothing. Well, yay, I'm glad that we popped up on the Facebook. Alright, I think we have success. Let's see. Is it all attached still? Haha. So this is one of the places where a chunkier chain is nice because it's harder to melt it. Like this lovely kind of, half round Rolo chain that I'm using is beautiful. It's also fairly inexpensive because it's really light, but it's also so incredibly easy to melt. It's like nut balls. Okay, so while that's cooling, we're gonna go ahead and set our stone. So I'm just gonna take my bezel that I made, and I'm gonna push my stone into it, and this is a pretty tight fit, so I'm gonna have to woman handle it a bit. I just want to make sure it's all in there and it's level. Okay, so this is a technique that I do not recommend trying at home unless you're really familiar with your stones, but if you can't quite get it level, you can, if your stone's sturdy enough, you can use a hammer to help you. So now my stone is nice and level, also has the benefit of there's no way that's falling out of there in any universe. So now I'm just going to take my prong pusher and I'm going to push the bezel down around my stone. So you just want to push it in. When your stone is this tight in here, you don't have to do the opposites thing because it's not moving. Like if you have to hammer it in there, it's just in there. So we're just going to roll the bezel over the whole thing. Make sure there's no airspace or weird corners. Like I said, typically I would have tumbled this before I set the stone, so that's the proper order of operations, but I know that this Instatight can go in the tumbler without any ill befalling it, so I'm just going to tumble it after, but that is not something I recommend, once again, unless you really, really know about your stones and what they can tolerate. Okay, so there we go. My Instatight is set. If I wanted to, I could work that a little bit more, and then if I really, really wanted to smooth the edges, I could go around it with a steel burnisher, and I could actually smooth those edges down so that they weren't quite so ruffly. So you could do that if you wanted to, or you can just leave it in its kind of organic state, which is what I think I'm going to do. Now, to set the stones in the ends of the toggle, you are going to need a setting burr that is the same size as your stone. So a setting burr looks like this. So it basically looks like a cut stone with lots of little teethies at the end of a steel shaft. You're going to take your setting burr and you're going to load it into your Dremel or your flex shaft. And then you're going to put your piece into a ring clamp. And the reason for that is it's going to get really hot. And you do not want to be holding that in your hands. So I just have it loaded into my ring clamp like so. I take the wedge, make sure I get the wedge in there really securely, which means push down on it really hard. And then I'm going to take my setting burr. And so what's going to happen, and I don't know how well, I think I can show this on camera. Let's see. Yeah, okay, so that's going to go down in there. And what you want to do is you want to burr out until your burr is about halfway down into your tube. Now, I'm going to warn you guys that this is not going to be the most pleasant sound you've ever heard in your life. So if you need to mute me, do it now. Oh. I didn't mute myself. My microphone just decided it was going to stop working. Maybe it didn't like the sound of the setting burr.
I mean, can't blame it
Right?
that much.
It's true. Sound should be back now. Alright, now we're going to do it on the other side. Maybe it'll spontaneously mute itself again. Who knows? Alright, there we go. Okay, well apparently my microphone really did not like that noise. So I'm gonna this one went a little deep as well, so I'm gonna file this one down. Okay, so what I have now are 2 bird out settings after the ear splitting screech, of course. So I've got 2 settings, bird out. So see how I've thinned out the wall and created a seat for my stone with my setting burr. So now I'm just going to take one of my little lab rubies. I'm going to set it face down. And just pop it in there. Like so. And then, I'm going to take that piece of leather. Okay, so I'm going to put this in my ring clamp again, and I'm going to use that to hold it while I set the stone. And you really want to make sure you get it in your ring clamp really, really tightly, because it's going to want to move. So now I'm going to take my prong pusher, and I'm going to, here, hold on, let's do that. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and use my prong pusher to just roll this over the edge of my stone. So my motion here is going to be in and then down, so that I'm literally, you can kind of see how I've flattened that edge out. I'm literally taking my edge and rolling it over my stone. And this is a little bit of a problem because it's got that piece in the middle, so it's hard for the ring clamp to get a good grip on it. And it does take a fair amount of strength to get this rolled over.
Gotta put some stank on it.
You do. Gotta put some stank on it. Am I still on camera? Okay, cool. Okay, so you can see how that shape is changing, okay, as I'm rolling it around. And ideally, you know, once I'm done, it'll all be symmetrical again. Alright, so I think I rolled it all the way around. And when you do this, it's important, if this is going to work, when you drop your stone in, the girdle of your stone has to be below the top level of your setting. The girdle is that wide part around the outside of the stone, because if it's not, there's no way this is going to work. Like, that physics don't work. Okay, so now we're going to test it, see if I got it in there good.
That dog don't fly.
It's true. Which
Most
means
don't, but you know.
I bet Sam could if he wanted to.
You know what? He could.
All right, so I'm gonna test it. I'm gonna say, hey, did I do this right? I'm gonna take a pokey thing, and I'm gonna try and push the stone out. And if it doesn't come out, which it's not, means you did it right. Now we're gonna repeat on the other side. So I'm gonna take my second little lab ruby and just pop it into the other side. And you can actually see, or I can, I don't know if you can on camera, but the difference, I'm trying to look around my camera, there we go, the difference in size between the side that I have rolled and the side that I haven't rolled, like in person it's very noticeable. So now we're going to pop this back into my ring clamp. And then I'm going to set the second one. Now, unfortunately, I can't do that poke test on the second one, so you're just going to have to make sure you do an extra good job of setting it. And also, I sometimes find it helpful if I don't have a bench. Look at all the lint on my shirt. If I don't have a bench pin to brace it against, I'll actually brace it against my chest. And that kind of allows me to get my maximum force. All right, bingo. That one's set. So that is our toggle with our gems at the... By that one's set, I meant that one's not quite set yet. It just fell out.
What?
It did! Thank you. Why you gotta be a pain in the ass at the end of the stream, Stone? Huh? Why is that?
Charles would like for it to be officially known he is Tetris champion.
Excellent. I am suitably impressed and I haven't even seen it yet. As long as I've got a place to sit to drive home, I'm good.
I don't feel like he'd declare himself champion that prematurely.
Fair. Okay, so, yeah. So one of my favorite tests for things where you can't do the poke test is to turn it upside down and bash it against the table a few times. Why are you being such a pain?
Just born that way.
Stop it.
But I don't want to.
I don't think it does want me to stream longer, Corvus. I think it's just... Are you punishing me through this stone for last night?
Ooh, could be.
I kind of feel like that's what's happening here. So you've had some kind of communication with the gods of stone setting. Oh, very nice. Thank you. Alright, for the moment we are going to declare that in there. I feel like I might need to do a little bit more work after stream, but for the moment, it's in there. So that is my toggle with my 2 lab rubies set in the ends. And then if I'm going to put this whole necklace together, I've got my toggle, I've got my clippy ring, I've got my set Insta-Tight, and I've got the rest of my chain. So then we're just going to open up the clippy ring, like so. We're going to drop the toggle charm on there. We're going to drop the bezel charm on there, and then we're going to drop both ends of the chain on there. And like I said, these are going to go in the tumbler, so they're going to get prettier. Close up your clippy ring. Alright, and there you go. I wish I hadn't melted this chain because this feels a little stubby to me. I might put a couple of jump rings on there because I would like it to just go down a little bit further. But that's it. That is the entire project of the toggle charm necklace. So thank you all so much for watching. Thank you for hanging out. I know it was a longer than normal stream. Like I said, I think next week I'm going to do a simple soldering project that's not going to take me forever and a day to finish. But thank you so much for hanging out on the Beading Dreams stream. I'm Allison for Beading Dreams in Dallas, Texas. You can find us on this channel, twitch.tv/Beading Dream. Thank you, Corvus. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday evenings. Wednesday evening we do a 6 p.m. tutorial, 7:30 p.m. chat stream. Thursdays is always a torch stream at 6 p.m. Fridays is Freeform Friday at 6 p.m. or Zoom, and Saturdays is a live sale at 6:30. So I will see y'all back on this channel, twitch.tv/Beading Dream, for Freeform Friday tomorrow. Thanks y'all so much. Take care. Bye.